Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Buddhang dhammang sanghang namasami. All conditioned things are dukkha. When with wisdom this is seen, one grows weary of all suffering. This is the path to purity. This is one of 3 verses from our chanting book. I believe they're Dhammapada verses. And I thought I would reflect on this. I've been using contemplation of dukkha more in my own practice recently. And it's the major foundation of Lumpur Sumedho's teachings. And I thought I would give some reflections about it. In practice, it's very useful to have more than one strategy, because sometimes what has worked for a while, well, conditions change and that doesn't work anymore, or doesn't work in the conditions that one has. And so, for example, for quite a while, I've been able to, from time to time, but on a fairly regular basis, contemplate some sukha, pretty, nice settled mind, bright, at least settled enough to become bright, and that's been very encouraging. But I think in part because of all the change that is going on and all the responsibilities that I have right now, that just hasn't been happening. And so, there's been lots of change happening. The house knocked down, moving into the reception hall, figuring out how everything is going to work here, and just, practice is not so strong that changing external conditions don't unsettle the mind. And so here it is. So one approach is to keep trying to do the same thing. And it's not bad to try, but sometimes it doesn't work. So another approach is to do something else, at least for a while. And so conditions that are not so suitable for stabilizing the mind can be great conditions for reflecting on the nature of dukkha. I think one of the definition of dukkha in the suttas is quite extensive and worth contemplating. Birth is dukkha, aging is dukkha, death is dukkha, sorrow, lamentation, pain, grief, and despair are dukkha. Association with the disliked is dukkha. Separation from the liked is dukkha. Not to get what one wants is dukkha. In brief, the 5 focuses of identity are dukkha. So, dukkha there's no single word that translates it. Suffering is good, but sometimes suffering is too strong. Not to get what one wants is dukkha, which means basically, there's either no or almost no time when one is actually getting everything that one wants. And so even when conditions are good, there's still dukkha, just more subtle. So it's certainly not the case that all conditioned things are, or it's always unbearable suffering, but it's never quite satisfactory. Stress is another translation, a bit more broad. But at the same time, it's important not to underestimate dukkha as well, because it can get pretty bad. It can get unbearable. And the goal of the Buddha's teachings is cessation of all of this. Another important aspect of dukkha is impersonal. It's so often what happens whenever when we think about suffering, it's either there's something wrong with me or there's something wrong with the world, or both. And that's why I suffer. That's why things are unpleasant. And so we spend our time trying to fix me or fix the world, and it never works. And this is samsara, the wandering on, the never complete, the never enough, the unescapable, or seemingly so. But the first noble truth is it's idang dukkhang. Basically, this is dukkha. It's dukkha. Not I'm suffering or the world sucks. This is dukkha. And this dukkha is to be understood. It's not the noble truths are not about this dukkha is to be fixed. This dukkha is to be gotten rid of. This dukkha is to be ignored. Those are all ways in which we usually approach suffering and all ways that perpetuate it. This dukkha is to be understood. And one thing that I notice myself doing is I'll see the suffering right now, you know, but it'll be there's this problem. I'll solve the problem, and then I'll get to the dukkha that I can actually contemplate in order to realize it, in order to understand the first noble truth. I'll fix the problem, and then I'll contemplate the dukkha. Somehow missing that, dukkha, the dukkha of the first noble truth is so all-encompassing that it's whatever's right here. It's not that it's not somewhere else. Um, I think there's definitely more to say on the conceptual level, but just to put in that at least one of the simplest ways of observing dukkha is simply being aware of the body. And it doesn't have to be anything, it's nothing special. The body is just always producing feelings that when you really look at them, they're not, maybe technically they fall under neither pleasant nor unpleasant feeling, but you'd really like the body to feel better than it does. It's continual sensations of this or that, just pulsating aliveness. It definitely isn't perfect. And a fairly subtle dukkha, but it's very present moment, very accessible, and also grounding. So rather than, and my sense is this is a much easier form of dukkha to contemplate than the intellectual puzzles that we create for ourselves, which are just as much dukkha, probably even more. But then if you've got a constructed problem, something in your mind, then it's often easier to, instead of trying to deal with it in the mind, to bring it into the body. And you can find the suffering there. And again, rather than in some types or approaches to the practice, you would then try to do some sort of practice, say mindfulness of breathing, to eliminate or to settle that tension caused by whatever you're thinking. But again, sort of idang dukkha practice is just, oh, yeah, it's like this. This is dukkha. Here it is. And it will change because that's the nature of things. But you don't have to try to make it change. Just notice, oh, this is dukkha. But immediately, just by paying attention to the body, you are changing something fairly significant. again, it's much more grounded. So as you listen to concepts about dukkha, you can actually experience it in this way right now. Another useful distinction in dukkha is the three types. There's dukkha, which is most obviously physical pain. Some types, I'm not sure whether some types of mental suffering fall here or not, but this is stuff that hurts. Whatever your attitude is towards it, it hurts. And the second type is viparinama dukkha. This is the dukkha of change. Even if you have something really pleasant, it's going to change. And one of our strategies for enjoying pleasant things is to cover up that fact with ignorance. That's one of the ways that ignorance flourishes, is we deliberately choose to hide the truth from ourselves so we can actually enjoy whatever enjoyable thing we're experiencing right now. And if you're really paying attention, you can watch this. I mean, I certainly, I remember back before I came to the monastery, I played a particular video game compulsively. And the longer I did this, the more time it took. I can only really enjoy it when I would ignore the effects of what it was doing to me. But as I kept paying attention, that took longer and longer before I could actually achieve that level of ignorance. So I ended up playing this game for more and more hours, which is rather and I suspect this is true for other forms of addictive behavior as well. We know it hurts us, we know it hurts others, but in order to actually enjoy it, we have to forget that, and it takes more and more time to do that. So that's our attempt to ignore this dukkha of change. And that's one example of the third kind of dukkha, which is sankhara dukkha, which is the suffering, the unsatisfactoriness that we add to the world. Because the first two types are just present in the nature of experience. Some experience is unpleasant, and so it's dukkha, and other experience is pleasant but will change, so it's dukkha too. And even the arahants, that's their experience too. The Buddha, no way to get away from those. But then the third kind of dukkha, and what really counts, is the dukkha that we add. And this is what we really have to understand, and we have to understand why we're adding it and how to stop. So this is the function of the remaining noble truths. The second noble truth is Tanha is that dukkha has a cause. That cause is tanha, craving, and and this craving is to be abandoned. And one of the ways to reflect on this is to, when dukkha arises, just watch. Am I expecting anything from the world? No? And that's, whenever I look, the answer is yes. If I'm suffering, I'm expecting something. Telling the conditioned world, okay, you need to be this way, and you're not. And for most of us, and for me right now, I usually can't stop that. Those expectations are already in there. Clinging to the 5 aggregates is dukkha, and it's happening. But there's a difference between being aware of that and not being aware of that. Unaware, again, there's something wrong with me or something wrong with the world. And with awareness, it's like, oh, I'm expecting something. And that's an activity. And if I understood it well enough, I could stop. Particularly in meditation, it can be useful to delve a bit deeper into the 5 khandhas, as the 5 khandhas subject to clinging as equivalent to dukkha. Because again, this helps to depersonalize and universalize this suffering. So, yeah, whatever form, whatever physical stuff there is, whether past, future, or present, internal or external, gross or subtle, near or far, internal or external, all this stuff is dukkha if you identify with it. If you make that me or mine, well, it's dukkha. Similarly, all feeling, vedana, the tone of experience, past, present, future, internal or external, near or far, gross or subtle. Identify that with that. Think of this as me or mine. It's dukkha. Perception. When something impacts the senses, we have a name for it. And we have a mass of associations with that name. This is a process it's partially automatic, partially conditioned by present input. And wherever it occurs, if we think start to place expectations on it, demand it should be this, it should be that, take it as mine, I'm this way, I have these perceptions, therefore I'm good or bad or whatever. Dukkha. Volitional formations. same thing. If clung to, whatever it is, dukkha. And then even consciousness, and here, sense consciousness, the raw experience of sight, sound, smell, taste, touch, and then some aspect of the mind. This raw experience, if identified as, me or mine, dukkha. And so this contemplation can lead to a sense of expansiveness and actually perhaps a fair amount of well-being and a settled mind, which is, it's useful to observe that the contemplation of dukkha can actually lead to sukha. So it is. And so this brings us to the third noble truth. It's possible, there is a cessation of this dukkha. The relinquishment, the total giving up, the putting down of that very craving. And this cessation of dukkha is to be realized. Which can mean both to make it real and to observe it. Because actually we drop our cravings very frequently. But we usually drop them because there's something else. We get distracted. There's some other craving that we're interested in, or we go to sleep, or any other number of things, but we don't actually notice, I did not get the object of my craving, but that's okay. And you just don't, one doesn't notice this. It just goes unobserved. Sometimes though, one does notice from time to time, particularly when it's larger things we really want. I can remember some years ago when I spent 1 year in Thailand about 5 years ago, and then I've had some physical problems, mobility issues since then, and and some years ago it actually began to sink in. Okay, I don't think I'm going to be able to go back to Thailand, or at least certainly not in the same way that I did in the past. That 1 year I was able to simply give myself to whatever was there. If people were mixing cement, well, I'd help mix cement. If there was a giant hill to walk up, well, I'd walk up the giant hill. If we had to sit on the floor for 6 hours, I think it was at most 3 that I can remember. Well, I'd sit on the floor for 3 hours, and you just do what everyone else is doing, and it was great practice. I really appreciated that sense of not knowing and not having to place expectations on what I experienced. But all of those activities require a body that doesn't break easily. And I came to the conclusion, well, I don't have that kind of body anymore. I need to place, if I don't pay attention to what I'm doing, I've demonstrated I can hurt myself and take months to recover. So this gradually sunk in, and I can remember towards the beginning of one winter retreat, like, okay, yeah, much as I would like to go back to Thailand and practice in that way, that's not going to happen. And at one point, yeah, I let go of that. Okay, what you really value about Thailand is what you learned there. It's not the place. It's not the place. It's not the people. Um, it's the Dhamma, and the Dhamma is here. You could go to Thailand and ignore the Dhamma, but Dhamma is here. And I can remember the feeling of it. It was the impression I had of it at the time was like being in a yeah, being out at night in a snowfall, but somehow the snow wasn't cold. Just there it was. Beautiful. And yeah, just to reflect on that nature of letting go and imagining this Lungpor Cha's jetty, where his relics are kept, is one of the most peaceful places that I think I've ever been. It's just so silent. It seems so silent, so calm, and such a fitting monument to to Ajahn Chah. And yet, it's not, even though, again, I don't know when I'll get back there, it's not the place. Ajahn Chah was once asked, what about, how do you define Nibbana? And I believe his response was, Nibbana is the reality of non-grasping. And yeah, that's and so that's that's Ajahn Chah's legacy. And to whatever extent one touches that, one is right there at that jetty, whether or not one is physically present. And then the fourth noble truth, the path of practice. Right view, which itself is often couched in terms of the Four Noble Truths. Right intention, right speech, right action, right livelihood, right effort, right mindfulness, and right concentration. This is, in order to practice the Noble Truths, you have to practice them with your life. It's not an intellectual endeavor. They're not truths to be figured out or proved the way that scientists or mathematicians or logicians prove things. One has to implement them in every aspect of one's life. And here right is sama, in tune. Not right in terms of following a legal text, but right in terms of what causes unwholesome states to decrease and wholesome states to increase. What is the in-tune response? So one who practices the Noble Eightfold Path is said to be unafflicted in the midst of an afflicted population, in balance amidst an unbalanced or population, or in tune amidst an untuned population. This is a path where you can, and also the path definitely includes the cultivation of bright, firmly established states of mind. Although different teachers have different opinions, it's not clear from the suttas which way one goes first, whether one establishes practice of samadhi, firmly establishing the mind, and then contemplates the Four Noble Truths, or it might also be possible to contemplate these truths and settle the mind in the process. And Luangpo Pasano, I used to ask Luangpo Pasano lots of questions about the Dhamma, but eventually I started to realize that he kept giving me the same answer almost all the time, and he'd give other people the same answer almost all the time as well. Maybe he'll usually give many more details than this, but what it boils down to is you ask him, should I do this or should I do that? Say, well, when you do this, are wholesome states increasing and unwholesome states decreasing? Then do this or that. Or if you do that and unwholesome states decrease and wholesome states increase, then do that. And then vice versa, avoid it. And so as to which way one should practice, at least, I don't think I can give, I'm not going to try to give better advice than that. So if anything is useful here, please use it, and if not, please practice in whatever way develops wholesome states for yourself. So I will close here for the evening.